talking to the suffering soul.
Yeah.
So when women who are successful, we are suffocating in our success. Women are dying. Women are having heart attacks and committing suicide and doing all these things because nobody's listening to the suffering soul who they are. People are just judging and talking about who life made them.
Welcome back to the Cannonball Mindset, and I am sitting with. Listen, I was trying to write down all your accomplishments, and there's not enough paper in the world, right? so I'm sitting with New York Times best-selling author, commander in the Coast Guard, graduate of Harvard Business School, Christy Rutherford, which I'm telling you, I love the name. If I could pick a name, Rutherford would be my last name. It just sounds powerful, right? Christy Rutherford. I'm really excited to have you on the show. I want to get right to my number one question, which is, how does somebody write 5 books, 5 New York Times bestsellers in a period of 8 months?
Actually, they were Amazon, but still.
Amazon bestsellers is even better, right? Because real people buy from Amazon. So 5 Amazon bestsellers in 8 months. How is that possible? How is that even remotely possible?
One, I'm a high achieving workaholic. And so I wrote 2 books in, I think, a period of 4 months. And as the year started to close, this is 2016, it's November. And I was like, I haven't really done anything this year. As Tori and I was talking earlier about how you get to the end of the year and high achievers, you want to do more. And I said, I haven't really done anything. I was telling my friend, I got into Harvard and that's awesome, but I just feel like I haven't done anything. She said, Christy, you wrote 2 books, right? I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. But that's not Christy intensity level. So it was November and I wrote 2 books in 16 days. Wrote and published 2 books in 16 days. So that ended up being the close of the 4 books in, I think, about 6 months. And then over the next couple of months, I wrote one more.
So you had momentum going and just it's taken me. Let me look at my watch. It's taken me 45 years to finish one book, right? Not even finish it yet. Where does the inspiration come from? Where have you always been like I put pen to paper and I just start going, or is it I research and then where does that inspiration come for you just to write?
Even in my career, I was a prolific writer. And so we used to write performance reviews, and I was the only person who really liked writing the performance reviews. And all the officers in the career was probably about 8,000 people. So I would get excited to write about, because it's a story. If you're writing about what a person has accomplished in a year, for me, it's about storytelling. And so to be that quote unquote weird person who was the only person who liked to write, when I left, I always knew I would write 5 to 6 books. And I kept saying, when I retire, I'm going to write 6 books. When I retire, I'm going to do this. So spending about 3 to 4 years becoming a follower again. So to be a leader, I left my career prematurely. And then I became a follower for 3 to 4 years. And then it became download time. So now what can I teach? How can I take this information and what can I use to tell the different story to teach other people what they need to be successful?
So you talked about everybody has a story. And you clearly have a story. Let's go back. I think what I really want to get to is what's your story.
Okay.
Right? And that'll encompass the stories you've written, the stories you performance evaluations. Let's go back. So you are only the 13th African American female to be promoted to commander in the Coast Guard.
Yes.
Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Why, how, when Coast Guard? How does one get to? What made you decide to go into the Coast Guard? What's the story behind your rise in the Coast Guard ranks?
I was in college, broke college student in the 90s, and my friend went to the Coast Guard. I wrote her letters. This one, we used to write letters to people, and she came back driving a Mitsubishi 3000 GT. Right?
From the Coast Guard.
Yes, she came back from boot camp driving a Mitsubishi 3000 GT. Later to learn that she got it financed at 25% interest, but whatever.
Right. Wow.
So I said, you know what? I don't even know what the Coast Guard is, but I want to get in. And my GPA was terrible at the time, but having that motivation and starting with the end in mind, like my end goal is I want that car. And so I brought up my GPA. So I was a CD, whatever student, A and PE, of course. Nice. And so I got all A's that semester, joined the Coast Guard, and then finished my college career in the next 2 years, and then I joined the Coast Guard and became an officer. So to join and be there, we were 0.1%. So when I joined, we probably had 20 black female officers at the time. And when I resigned prematurely, I left with 3.5 years left to retire. So that's another different story. We'll get into it. But 0.1% of the organization, 50 black women officers out of 47,000 people. There are going to be challenges. So, but we chased drug runners in the Caribbean, regulated all the large oil companies. I spent 14 days at Katrina. So I've done a lot of stuff. Yeah. So to be a commander is really about understanding how to create high-performing teams, and being a leader that people will follow. So I didn't do it by myself.
So what kind of so I'll get to the why you I'll get to the question of why you left prematurely, but let's talk about the 50 black females in the entire leadership of Coast Guard. It sounds unfathomable. It doesn't even sound like that can be true, but I'm assuming it is. What is that like? I'm saying, to be one of them, and what's the struggles that you had to deal with? I'm saying, again, I'm consciously ignorant when it comes to the Coast Guard. I know I don't know what I'm talking about. So help me through this. Like, that struggle to get to that seems pretty freaking amazing, but gosh, it's got to be hard.
It's tough. It's tough being one of a few black women in the office, but then one in the only state. So I was fortunate when I was on my ship, I was with another black female officer. So she was my classmate. So we went together. So I had this togetherness. In my next office, we actually had 6. So if we had 30 or 40 at the time, 6 were in the same office. It was an experiment, and we put, a cluster of black women together. Would they be successful? But if you walk somewhere, I think if I build my reputation in my office and people know who I am, the challenge is when I leave the office, if you leave your culture, if you leave the group of people who know you and you don't know me, disrespect was normal. It's expected that you salute officers when you pass them. 50% of white men would not salute me. And I would explode into rage, like internally combust. So I couldn't address them properly to say, did you not just see me? So if I left, there was expected disrespect. People would look through me, or people would look at me like, if you've never seen another black female officer, I equated us to, if you have a sighting of someone, you say, hey, have you ever seen a white male officer? Yes, I've seen 3,000. Well, what about a black woman? Well, I think I saw one 2 years ago. So there were challenges with that.
And so you get through it, you deal with it, however you're able to deal with it. And I'm assuming that rage of that officer that walked by that didn't salute you, I'm assuming you didn't ram his head into a wall or something like I'm assuming wanted to. How do you internally want to combust, but not externally want to combust, not externally combust?
So it depends. So I remember being young, and nobody would do what I told them to do, because when you're young, you have most of the people who work for you are older than you. I'm doing other people's jobs. I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Nobody would do what I told them to do. And I remember collapsing on my boss's office one day. So this is the turn, and this is going to be an interesting story because I don't think I've told this story. So you're in for a treat. Perfect. And I collapsed because I'm exhausted and I'm tired, and I have like secret material, and I collapse in his office and I throw the papers up, and I'm all dramatic, and I'm sobbing and I'm crying because I know I'm doing other people's jobs and nobody's doing what I tell them to do. And I was on a ship at the time, and I tell these guys to sweep the floor because that's their job, and they would tell me no. Or one lady was supposed to give me 5 numbers, but she gave me a stack of papers instead of giving me the 5 numbers. So my boss said, Christy, get up, dry your tears, figure out what you need to do to get people to do what you tell them to do. So I said, okay. So then I just went into straight aggressive, angry, if you don't sweep this floor, I'm going to break this stick and shove it up your ASS. If you don't give me these numbers that I want. So I marched right out of the office. I said, okay. And I marched to the one lady's office, and I slammed the papers down. I said, if you don't give me these numbers in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to come in and I'm going to rearrange your whole office. And then the next time they said, they're not going to sweep the floor. If you don't sweep this floor, I'm going to break this broomstick off and shove it up your ASS. So I became this aggressor. And so I would move furniture, which created a lot of challenges where if you don't do what I say, I'm going to physically rearrange this whole desk right here to show you who you're messing with. So I call it the game of who has the biggest balls. Who has the biggest balls? So if I'm in a male dominated work environment, I started to, and this is by Harvard research, I started to assimilate into the organization. So I started to take on the energy of a man and to start to present like a man. And now we're going to have this ego contest. Well, who's going to win? It's going to be me.
Yeah.
And that's how I started to manage people. But because, Chad, video was not prevalent.
Yeah, right.
Cell phones, nobody could prove it.
Yeah, right.
So that was a turning point in my career, and I carried that out for a good 10 years.
Wow. And so in that, what would you say to somebody now who's dealing with the same situation? Would you tell them the same, assimilate to their environment? Mm-hmm. Would you give them that same advice now for somebody that's dealing with they're the one-offs, mm-hmm. the what do you say, I remember when I saw, mm-hmm. if they're that person, what is?
Absolutely not. The personal development was what I was missing. So if I wanted to do something in 4 months, they say it's impossible. I would get it done in 2 weeks. So I was always professionally developing. I was always getting degrees. I had more degrees than a thermometer. I was always getting something to prove myself and to prove to other people that I belonged in the organization. So I was always seeking awards and recognition and getting all these things, but I didn't do personal development. I didn't grow my personal self at the same rate that I did my professional self. So professionally, I was 400 feet tall. Personally, I was still 5 feet tall. And the gap really shows up in how you behave. So now this is about being able to have the conversation sternly and firmly, but without physical aggression, because when you rearrange furniture, it shows and it reflects in your leadership style. It reflects in your leadership character. And I just destroyed my peace.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to go home and start to feel guilty about overreacting. Yeah. and not I think acting in a way that a leader would be expected to. So really, and that's what I coach women on, is how do you be firm? How do you be straightforward with people and direct without having the internal rage? So meditation goes into that, exercise, and a whole host of other things to do that. So I don't recommend that now.
Yeah, perfect. And so I want to get to the women's leadership part, because that's what your business is about. That's mm-hmm. What you're one of the areas you're an expert in. But let's talk about, so why leave the Coast Guard 3 years before retirement? Because
I was rearranging furniture and cursing people out, and I was exhausted from myself. I was stressed out. I was tired. I didn't like myself because I become somebody. I'm a free spirit. And so I always ask people, are you who you are, or are you who life made you? Mm. Life made me somebody completely different. Life made me somebody that I no longer recognize in the mirror. And even though I was successful and I had the money and the prestige and the power and all these things, I hated myself. Mm. So I would look in the mirror and say, Christy, I don't know you anymore. And I got my coaching certification in 2008, 2009 at Georgetown. And my classmates talked about authenticity. They said authenticity as much as I talked about sweet tea. I didn't know what it meant, because I assimilated and then I conformed. The military is conformity. And when I figured out what it was really when I rediscovered myself. So then in that moment, I could see how I unconsciously gave away parts of who I was. I unconsciously gave away my preferences. I unconsciously became somebody else. And I worked on Capitol Hill at the time. So when I went back to the Coast Guard, and I remember the first 2 days we had these meetings, and I was in charge, number 4 out of 300. And the oil from BP started to show up on the Texas beaches. And I went down to these meetings, and they lasted an hour, and they should have been 10 minutes because nobody would listen to me. Because I'm nice, and there are butterflies on my planet, and rainbows, and so I'm talking like this. So the energy didn't fit the environment. And on the third day, I sat at my desk. And I said, okay, Christy, you're going to have to do. I don't want to do this. So I physically kicked the door open. Like, boom. Can y'all see that on the camera? Physically kicked the door open. Started dropping F-bombs, pumping my fist and taking names. And the meeting lasted 10 minutes. Everybody kind of straightened up and they started doing what I told them to do. And in that moment, now I'm consciously giving away what I just got back. I'm consciously giving away parts of myself. And after 2 years of that, I had a boss who was a maniac. So he gave me permission to do what I really wanted to do, which was leave. Yeah.
Oh, great story. Wow. So the idea of standing in your own truth, the idea of losing yourself because of the environment you're in, and then coming to that realization, that's got to be one, scary, but two, liberating. I'm saying it's really borderline. It's scary in the sense of who have I become, but liberating in the sense of I recognize it and I can choose now to do so. It's being consciously competent in your ability to want to do something, right?
I mean, is what does success mean to you? Like, success no longer meant, because I did it already. Success didn't mean the awards and the national attention. I have crystal trophy, like Tiffany crystals, and the I Love Me walls where I have all these awards up on. So what does that really mean if you don't have peace? If you don't have joy? And so to find the joy and to find the rainbow and then give it away, what does success mean to you? And I changed my definition of success. So what does the pension really mean? Oh, it would have been awesome. But the boss, he gave me permission, and it's law of attraction, so that's typically pretty much what happened. I attracted him into my life to create the story to get me to leave so I can live the life that I live now. I appreciate him for it. I forgave him about a year later for him just playing a part, because if I got this is the life that I visualized, this is the life that I wanted, this is the life that I dreamed about, this is the life that I wrote about, messing around with Oprah. This is the life that, I could see it and I could feel it. But this life started after retirement. I was not leaving my check. It was amazing. Right. But that life started prematurely. And after I realized that I got the life that I wanted, how can I now be a victim of the story of how it happened? So I forgave him his edible arrangement the year anniversary that I put in my resignation letter. And I thanked him for setting me free and liberating me to now live the life that I really wanted.
That you always wanted. What is the next step for you then? So you're now realize you don't like the person you've become. That's not who you are at your very core. You're going against who you are at your core. So what's the next shift? So what happens next? So how do you get into women's leadership development? Like, is there a time, like what was the next phase?
So the next phase for me, after I left and I worked with a network marketing company, because network marketing people are so happy. They're like, you think they're high. It's awesome.
Half of them are.
Yes. And so I was with them for a year and really just unraveling and just going to the light. Like, I'm leaving the darkness and I'm with the light. And then I took a year to run away from me. And then when I stopped, and I exploded into 1,000 pieces. So whenever I had to stop, so in that moment, and this is a story that I don't tell often, but I was a six-figure earner. So I saved about $120,000 at the time. And I ran through that money in a year because I'm a six-figure earner. I'm a lifestyle. I love it. And so I had about 20 job offers at the time, but I knew that I still wasn't whole. There was some brokenness that was there. There was some marbles that I was missing. There was peace. There was joy. There were all these things. So I had the opportunity to either stop and fix what was broken or continue to operate in a career knowing that I wasn't fully where I was. So I spent 3.5 years in South Carolina rediscovering me. So it was a process of, when I talked about becoming a follower again, now I'm a clean slate. It was, who am I? If I'm not this military officer, which was traumatic to the soul to not realize I wasn't who, in a career I created. But if I'm not that and I've lost who I was, now it's about rediscovery. So that was, and then I burned out. So that was catastrophic. So 3.5 years of getting up, discovering who I was, figuring out what are my preferences, what do I like, but then for the most part, forgiving other people, forgiving the story, forgiving the bosses, forgiving the bad relationships and the negative experiences and the childhood trauma and all these things. So that was the process that took 3.5 years. So I was not a willing participant in my process.
And that whole forgiveness exploration, was it, how much of it was forgiving yourself for becoming a person that you didn't like what you saw when you looked in the mirror?
That was probably 5 months. That was, it was, so it's forgiving self, but then it's also mourning the life that I could have had I not stayed that long. It was mourning the life that I thought I should have had I not joined the military. And I don't regret my career. I had a great time, but if I didn't do that, this is who I would be. And then mourning the life of giving up who I was and seeing who life made me. So that morning was probably 5-6 months. So that was straight crying every day and then trying to figure out, all right, well, is that true or was that necessary?
Yeah. All right. So then when does the writing start? When does the all right, what comes first? Is it the deciding to go into women's leadership and using your story to empower others, or is it the writing that leads to which comes first?
The writing started first. Yeah. So the writing started first, where if I had all this data, I'm studying Jim Rome and Earl Nightingale, Napoleon Hill, Oprah, T.D. Jakes, Joel Osteen. So I'm studying all these people and all these leaders, figuring out what are the principles and the philosophies of leadership. So when I think about success is predictable. There's a roadmap to success if you do certain things. So all the people who are talking today, they're really talking about what Wallace D. Wattles talked about in 1910 and what James Allen talked about in 1898. So understanding that framework, and then I think getting comfortable to the point that I had fully regenerated myself. Now it's share the books. Now it's share the insight, and this is a download. So the women's part didn't come until actually January this year. So I was training leaders, but I didn't want to talk about women. I didn't want to talk to women because I never want to tell my story. People who win, like you have the people who always want to tell their story and, oh, the woe is me and this is what happened to me. Winners never want to tell their story. Like I never wanted to talk about how I burned out. I never wanted to talk about how I was missing some marbles. I never wanted to talk about how I was harassed and became somebody different. So I was always talking to leaders, and my business didn't take shape because I wasn't where I belonged. So when you have purpose, when you get into alignment with exactly where you're supposed to be, then things will move. I refused to do it for probably 3 years. Yeah. So I was training leaders. Yeah. And then in January, I was like, all right, fine, I'll talk to women, because there are so many women who are suffering silently and could learn from my story. So that's pretty much what I do now.
Why didn't you want to talk to women? What was the reason? I understand. So winners don't tell their story, or they're not the victim, but your story seems to be a pretty powerful story. Now I'm hearing it, now, not in the height of when you had just come out of it, but why not tell your story? There's a guy, I know, he talks about courageous vulnerability, and what's the reason? What stopped you from being courageously vulnerable?
I think in some part, when I look at women's conferences, they weren't having the conversation. They weren't there. When you talk about, oh, this is going to be good. Let me choose my words wisely before I piss some people off. But
definitely don't choose your words wisely. choose the words that are going to piss people off, please. It always makes for a better podcast.
Well, when I think about women's empowerment, right? And I went to one conference, and this lady was talking about, 90% of women don't get to the C-suite because their husbands don't clean up and wash the dishes, and they don't, babysit the kids, and Black women make the least amount of money than everybody, and white women do this, and blah, 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 blah. So many people offering disempowering information. And I actually left. I said, you know what? You're not talking to me, because if 90% of the women didn't make it, 10% did. I'm in the 10%. So, and I'm looking at the women in the room, and so I'm getting mad now. I'm starting to get hot because it made me mad. So the women in the room, so you have people who are ambitious, and they want to go after it, and they want to go get it. We're the ones who have the challenges. We're the ones who will stay for 16 years and be harassed or be disrespected and rearrange furniture because we find out how to have grit and survive in an organization to rise, as opposed to falling down and saying they ran me out. No, they didn't run me out. Right. I'm going to fight you until I'm done. And so the women in the room were using that data to give them permission to stay where they were, which pissed me off. Like, they agreed with it, and they were all sad, and the energy was whack. And I said, you know what? The women who are winning are at their desk working. I mean, they're not in here listening to that. So I left. So when I think about women, and I was just telling my client today, I'm not for everybody. I'm for the ambitious women, because I know what our challenges are. I know what our secrets are. I know what the struggles are. I know exactly what we suffer with, but nobody really talks to high-power women. People talk about high-power women. People talk about the ambitious women. They never talk to us. So you have women who are highly successful, who are suffering silently. You have women who are drowning in their success. Think about Kate Spade, right? So Kate Spade was having challenges, but can Kate Spade really confess her challenges to somebody? And who's going to rat her out? One. And then two, she built a brand. Remember I talked about the professionally developed person and then the human? When she says, I have challenges, people are looking at the brand that she created. And they're like, girl, you got money. If I had your money, I would buy a husband. Why don't you go do some retail therapy? But people aren't talking to the suffering soul.
Yeah.
So when women who are successful, we are suffocating in our success. Women are dying. Women are having heart attacks and committing suicide and doing all these things because nobody's listening to the suffering soul who they are. People are just judging and talking about who life made them.
Yeah, I love that. Is that because when you, again, I've never been a female, and I don't think I will be. but the idea that when you're a female and you have these levels of success that the cultural norm thinks is now, I think it's becoming more prevalent now, which I'm really, as a father of two daughters, really proud of and happy of. Happy is not the right word. I'm really excited about. I think is that because when you get to a certain level, you are afraid to, not you personally, but women are afraid to show that vulnerability so they suffer in silence.
Oh yeah.
Because I made it this far and people are waiting for me to crack so they can say, see, told you, they don't have the emotional fortitude to be able to do this, so they just suffer in silence until it's too late.
Well, I think, even in my office, I was number 4 out of 300, and 160 of them worked for me. I was one of the few, I think it was 3 black women in the office, but the one only black woman in the C-suite. That would have been our C-suite equivalent. And my peer was my boss, who was a 45-year-old white man. And I'm 37. And that's like, because had I been one level down, I would have 20 peers and I could hang out with other people. But because I was not the boss, I didn't have anybody to socialize with.
Yeah, you're in your own silo.
And in Port Arthur, Texas, which is, right? Yeah. If there are any Port Arthur people in Port Arthur, love it. But so now I'm there. I'm in the boardroom. And my whole career, I aspired to be at the 8 o'clock meeting. Like, oh my God, because that's where the high ranking officers go. Oh my God, I want to be in the 8 o'clock meeting. The 8 o'clock meeting was Nightmare on Elm Street. Every day started at 8 o'clock in the morning. And all of my mentors were men. So they would, black men, white men, but mostly men. But the men couldn't prepare me for being a woman of color in that room. So now I'm having challenges there. So I thought that when I made it to the 8 o'clock meeting, when I finally made it and got my seat at the table, that I made it. No. The fight just begins. Now I have to defend that seat every single day. So it's stuff like that goes on and we can't talk. Who am I going to tell? My boss? Yeah. My peer is my 45-year-old white man boss. Who am I going to tell? My friends? They know they're suffering too because we talk about it over martinis on a regular basis. We fly to Miami and to Vegas and to New York and complain and drink and talk about our problems. But am I going to tell the men who work with me? They want my job and think that I got it because I was a black woman. Yeah. So who am I going to talk to? My family? I make 4 times more money than my family.
Yeah, right. Really a lonely position.
You have nobody to talk to, and you think that you're by yourself. And so I wrote a book, my last book actually, I interviewed 36 women, all Harvard Business School alumni. These women are phenomenal from 25 countries. And so the more I started to talk to ambitious women, the more I discovered when I say identical story, we have the exact same stories. So if the woman in China, the woman in South Africa, I'm like, why do we have the same story? We have the exact same challenges. We have the exact same things we did to achieve high levels of success, but we have the exact same secret fears, and we're all thinking that we're in our own heads. And so my goal is to share insight with women. So I talk to ambitious women, and I talk a little straightforward and direct. Everybody don't like me. That's okay. Because I'm meant to talk to a certain group of women and let them know you're not by yourself. And if you understand, like if I would have knew at my desk in that moment to have somebody like me or to have a book that I just wrote to say, hey, a woman in China has the exact same problem. So it takes away women self-destruct in our own heads and our own hearts. We self-destruct from within. Yeah. And is it really true? Well, if I'm only within my head, like Albert Einstein says, you can't solve a problem with the same level of thinking used to create it. If I'm only here, then how do I know that other women have the exact same challenge? So that's the women's leadership part that I've now expanded into.
I love that. So are things getting better? So in this movement, in this day and age now, so I will tell you, I would not know, and I say this all the time. If I didn't have, I'm married to an amazing woman, a woman who is a doctor and a lawyer, a woman who owns her own company, amazing individual. My mother is an amazing individual. Even with those 2 powerful women in my life, I would tell you that I would not know what I know today if it wasn't for my 14-year-old daughters. So it took having my daughters for me to see how the world views men and women completely different. I don't care what you say, my daughters will be judged based on their looks more than I will. They will be judged based on their gender more than I will. They will be them in sports will be judged differently. Them in work will be judged differently. Everything. And so I wouldn't have known that had I not had daughters. I would have known it on maybe a 30,000 foot level, but now I'm entrenched in it because for me, I want my daughters to understand that they are amazing human beings, strong, powerful women that can change the world. As I delve more into it, I see, but from a white man, 45-year-old man perspective, that it's getting better. I see it getting better, but is it really getting better, or is this just a cover job? Is this just a small movement that's going to not pick up enough traction to actually make a difference in women's rights?
I would want to say that that is getting better, but the data's still there. Yeah. So the world would get better when more people start to care. The world would get better when other people want to pick up the mantle and make it a better place. But when I think about reading Outwitting the Devil, have you heard of Outwitting the Devil from Napoleon Hill? It's one of the greatest.
I like Napoleon Hill, so I will be reading that.
It's fantastic. So he wrote this book in 1939, and the problems are still the same. So are there any new problems in the world? Are we still regenerating the same issues cycle after cycle after cycle? And I think that things do get better in the world. And I do think that women become greater by their dads empowering them and telling them that they're okay, but then also giving them an outlet to share how they really feel and not be minimized. I wrote an article last week, and I call it The Day My Boss Called Me Incompetent. Because my coach was like, Christy, you need to share your story. And I'm like, I don't want to, but I will. So I shared a story where my boss called me incompetent. The first day he met me, this is my brand new boss. I had been at this office for 2 years, and he said, you're incompetent. And I was like, this was when I was arrogant. I said, excuse me? He was like, you're incompetent. And I laughed in his face and walked off. And, so it was an article to talk about what I would have done differently, how that escalated to him screaming in my face, and he harassed women and had them crying, and I never cried in his office, which pissed him off even more. This was 2004. And this guy inboxed me. He was like, oh my God, a girl should never have to go through those challenges. And I literally cried when I read your story. And I asked my client earlier, I said, did you see weakness in my story where I wanted you to feel sorry for me? She said, no, I'm a strong woman. And so I think that if you have the ability to listen and not think that if a woman is sharing a story that she automatically wants you to feel sorry for her, or he didn't even hear me, because if you had read it in the tone that I wrote it, which I write how I talk, there was no weakness in the story, but he wanted to find somebody to feel sorry for. And I think that you as a father, if you have the capacity to where your daughters can share and not fall into the hole, or not allow, I think the biggest thing is not allow how somebody's judgment of them changes how they see themselves. So the self-love and understanding who they are, emotionally, physically, spiritually, like understanding who you are at your core, that's what will change the world even more, because you won't shrink, or you won't minimize, or you won't adjust. You won't become aggressive to be listened to. You'll just stand in your power and your strength and own it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Listen, I've been married 18 years, and if I could figure out one thing, it would be how not to try to solve my wife's problems, because that's the last thing she wants me to do. She makes it very clear. Listen, I'm telling you because I just want you to hear me. I don't need you to solve them. But as me, I always feel like, oh, I gotta be the protector, and I jump into this role that being married to a strong, powerful woman, I don't need. She doesn't need. She just wants me to listen to her. That's Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I've read the book, and I'm telling you, I can run the New York City Marathon 3 times, but I can't stop getting out of my own damn way with my wife. It's horrible. So now you've created this outlet for women to not feel alone, for women to rise up and to not get there, but then realize that they're standing by themselves, because there's no enjoyment in rising up and then being alone. Right? there's nothing, because it's about it's about this.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the connections in life. It's about the connections and the contribution. And if you're rise up, I'm assuming you want connection and you want to contribute to people that want to be contributed to. So you've created this outlet. So how do you share it? So I know you own a company, and how do you get this word out there?
So I share it through books. I share it through writing. Now I'm speaking more, trainings. I actually talked to a lady with a phenomenal magazine earlier to talk to other companies. So training women, speaking, books, writing, the whole shebang. Yeah, the podcast. Yeah.
Cannonball Mindset podcast.
And this phenomenal, incredible
See
Cannonball Mindset podcast.
See how I set that up?
Talking to you.
Yeah, see how I set that up?
Sharing the love.
It's almost like talking to Oprah. Almost. So listen. So all right. So now the idea of if right now somebody's listening to this,
mm-hmm.
and it's a female, and they are thinking, well, I want more success, but maybe I've been in the victim category. Maybe I've been in the 98% or 95% that are in that conference that are on the other side, not the empowered side that are actually going to go put into action, but they're going to blame whatever it may be. What's the advice for them? How do they get out of that? How do they stop? How do they get out of their own way? And I say that with all due respect. But how do they get out of their own way so they can start their warrior march?
I talk to somebody outside of themselves. Hire a coach, hire a therapist, but for the most part, it's talk to somebody outside of yourself, because there's someone who empowers you, not someone who cuddles with you in your comfort zone. Be willing to get out of your own way. I think about some of my clients, and one of them I said, hey, she's exhausted, teacher. Within 7 days, she cut all ties of everything that was holding her back, and now she's clear on what her purpose is. And that took 14 days.
Wow.
So really is having the tough conversation with people and allowing somebody to call you out on your BS and assist you with getting out of your own way, and not continuing to be comfortable with telling a story that you should be tired of telling.
Yeah. So a lot of people surround themselves with empathizers and not disruptors.
Yes.
Because empathy feels good, right? So listen, if I want empathy, I call my mom. My mom is the greatest empathizer in the world. It doesn't matter. Listen, I could be failing miserably, drowning in my own misery, and she will literally say, "It's all right. Don't worry. You'll be fine." Like, it doesn't matter, right? Yeah. She's world's greatest empathizer. But that's not going to move me forward. It's going to keep me where I am. It's going to make me feel safe and secure, but it doesn't move me forward. What is the hardest thing about people surround themselves with disruptors? And that's what it sounds like you are. You sound like you are a disruptor. You're going to push against the conventional norms. I'm going to tell you not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Why is that so hard?
Well, people like to be comfortable. Women love to be liked. Women like for people to... I mean, you really want to just fit in. We're conditioned for people to like us, to be a people pleaser. And so if somebody says something counter to that, like I think about one of my clients wrote on Facebook, Christy will serve my BS back to me on a plate. Yes, that's what I do. So getting uncomfortable and being willing to do the unthinkable, be willing to shift careers and leave 3.5 years left to retire, or be willing to leave that job where you're being harassed and your hair is falling out, be willing to look inside and figure out what your value is. I mean, if you have value in the market, you have value outside of that job. You can go somewhere else. So it's being willing to take action and do something. Take the smallest thing. Even if you don't hire somebody, go to an event. Do something outside of yourself to allow. I think it's really about self-reflection. And self-reflection will give you self-reflection from somebody else who has the success or the peace that you want, and it's going to disrupt your mindset. So I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think. Listen, I'm with you. I think that there's got to be a jolt to the system at some point. Some point, some way, somehow. There's got to be a shock to your system, right? To get your ass moving.
Well, most women, what I've learned, I was talking to my friend about this the other day. Most successful women have a very high pain tolerance. Like, we put up with a lot of BS.
Oh yeah.
So by the time we say we're in trouble, we're already 95% buried. Yeah. So that's the challenge with successful women is successful women don't the high pain tolerance and the ability to put up with a lot of BS. So whenever we do scream uncle, it's already like the only thing left in the quicksand is your finger.
Yeah.
So you have to call somebody. So people either change through inspiration or desperation. Yeah, and the challenge is most successful women wait till they're desperate and they're on the ground before they actually choose to change, which I was desperate. Like I had all kind of stuff going on before I left. So my goal is to assist women with inspiration and to allow them to get insight to change before they become desperate, because that's not a place that you want to be in.
I love that. Yeah, I agree 100%. Find the inspiration before you have to act on desperation. Because acting on desperation it's a much tougher battle.
You walk away from your pension with 3.5 years left to retire. I would have retired 2 years ago.
Really important question on that. Did you ever get the Mitsubishi 3000 GT?
No, I bought a Passport. Oh, I bought a Dodge Durango.
A Dodge Durango. So so there's
That's
something
when they
there.
first came out.
So you went from sports car, right? Mitsubishi 3000 GT is a sports car.
No, I never got the. Yeah, I never
right,
got
but
the.
that's
That
what
was
you
her.
wanted.
Yeah.
That's what you wanted, and you end up buying an SUV.
Yeah, it was that. I went to boot camp. That male energy.
Yeah, evolved. So now give me the Durango. I'm gonna run some shit over with this. I don't need to go fast. I need to run shit over.
That's pretty much. It's a V8. Yeah, it was. Awesome.
And that's you. But that's you, right?
Yeah.
That analogy is you. You go in looking to go fast, and you come out just kicking ass.
Yes, pretty much.
Right. That's awesome. And so, all right, a couple more questions. So,
okay.
So one, where do people find you?
My website, ChristyRutherford.com, or they can text the number 66866, or they can text Christy to 66866 to get on my mailing list and get one of my free ebooks.
One of your free? How many? I'm afraid to even ask how many freaking ebooks you've written. Right?
Like, which one will I give away? So one is how to unleash your power and live a breakthrough life in 2019. So that's one that I'll give away.
Listen. I write a blog, and I'll have Morgan like read it 10 times. I'll have her proofread it. It's one blog, and it takes me like 6 weeks to write. And you're like, oh no, listen, I'll shoot out a book for this. Yeah, no problem. It's crazy. That's some crazy shit. All right, so they find you, they follow you. Listen, we covered a tip of the iceberg today. From your experiences and your stories. In these books that you've written, are there more Christy Rutherford stories?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's the so the first one is Shackled to Success. That's the one where I talked about my career. That's when I talked about moving furniture and kicking ASS and taking names. I cursed a lot in that book.
I do like how you keep spelling the word ass and not saying it. Like I'm trying to be proper, but I'm not really proper. Or hoping that the people that are listening can't spell. But you can say ass. But
take names.
It's like I'm proper, but I'm still like to cuss, right?
Yes, I mean, it's leadership books that are coming out next year. One is called Unapologetic, and that's going to be talking about owning your success like a boss, and Third Degree Success, which is self-love, self-confidence, self-leadership. So a lot of leadership books that are going to be coming out next year.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I read a lot of books. It would take me an entire year to read all your books. It's some crazy shit. All right, last question. When you leave this earth, you're pretty young. So let's say 70 years from now, you leave this earth. What do you want your contribution to have been to this world?
My contribution. I think for me, it's about family. And my goal when I joined the military and went to college was to break the generational poverty and the mindset of working in steel mills or cotton mills or all the jobs that have been outsourced to China, Mexico. So for me, it was to change my family generationally. So my goal is to build a school in my hometown and also a community center. So the school will catch my younger generation, the younger cousins. I have a gazillion cousins in my family. And then the community center assists the other, my family members, but also the community. Everybody gets the benefit, right? But it's about my family who left college, who didn't have the clarity or who didn't have the direction, who didn't have the fortitude to stick it out and do something different, but then also replicate that throughout the state of South Carolina. So really it's about changing women and allowing them to be at home for their families and allowing them to be great spouses for their husbands and allowing them to be great moms to their children and not solely focus on success. And then also impacting my family where we break the generational poverty. We break the generational curses. We break the mindset of just settling for less than you desire and deserve and just going after it. So that's what I want my legacy to be.
Wow. Great answer. I said last question. I'll ask you one last question. Second last question. What's your superpower?
My superpower is seeing who a person can become. So I don't see you for who you are. I see you for your potential. And then my job is to work with you to get you to see who I saw. So one of my clients I talked about, and one of my Harvard classmates actually, and we worked, his boss said he wasn't a leader. And he's just been promoted to like a huge job. But his boss said he wasn't a leader. And so after we worked together, probably about 6 months, and now he got promoted, and then he ended up getting recruited to be the CEO of another company. He said, Christy, how did you see me when you met me? I said, I saw you like I see you now. He's like, no. Like when you saw me, what did you think of me? I said, I saw who I see now. But my job was now to get you to see who I saw. Nice. So that's my superpower, is seeing a person for who they can become and not who they are.
Damn, I like that. All right, listen. If you want to find out more, and there's a shitload more. I'm sorry, SHIT more. Then get in touch with Christy Rutherford, the best name in the business for sure. Commander, author, really just badass.
Thank you.
Badass. #badass. Make sure you follow her. Make sure you share this, comment, like it. Do whatever you have to do. Send it out to carrier pigeons. I don't know, but send this episode out because she's bad. She's bad. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.